Super Mario Bros. Wonder is an absolute joy from start to finish. After years upon years of no fresh 2D installments into the series, Wonder really does prove that good things come to those who wait. From its fantastic gameplay, to its beautiful art style and vivid colours, to its overall focus on constantly doing something new, which is sort of ironic, because this is the game that dropped that new prefix. Our adventure takes place in the Flower Kingdom this time around, and while the general story doesn't do anything massively different from most Mario adventures, it does have a little bit more of a spark to it. Each place you go to tends to have little RPG-like story elements sprinkled in, and once you do get near to the final boss fight, Bowser starts to ramp up with a refreshing bit of charisma. Of course though, this was never going to be the absolute highlight of the game, because we have new enemies, new power-ups, new courses, new concepts. Hell, we even have some voice acting this time around.
No, shut up you dickhead, now fuck off!
And all of this is just done brilliantly. It honestly could have really easily felt like a cluster of random ass things being flung at you in a way that just sort of overwhelms us with bright and colourful crap, just to kind of say, hey look guys, look at how different and experimental we're being now. But it really doesn't feel that way at all. Whenever we see something new and wacky, it's done in a way that feels natural and fun, rather than forced and annoying. So what we've got is essentially a solid base in the form of a Mario platformer, with a layer of high quality brand new content, then a layer of stunning visuals and sound, topped off with a sprinkle of weird and wacky Wonder Flower sections. Super Mario Wonder is fantastic. It's amazing. It's wonderful. There, I made the obvious joke. Let's move on. The game controls pretty similarly to what we've grown to expect, and most of your usual moveset is here, but it's definitely not a copy and paste of the previous few games. There tends to be a bit more weight to your character, and your movements feel extremely good to control, and some characters do have slightly different movesets, which can be great for someone that is new to the games, or just wants a more relaxed experience. The levels in Wonder are what really shine though. Every single level feels stupidly fun to play through, to the point where I would sometimes even go back to them to make sure that I got and saw everything there was to offer. One thing that I was really worried about going into the game was that each world would feel really distinct from one another, but the levels within that world would feel a bit samey and didn't always stand out. But honestly, this couldn't be further from the truth. Right from the get-go, each level just oozes with personality, and you know what the general idea was for the developers when creating it. So even though the levels, on the whole, tend to have overarching themes from world to world, each of the levels feels so different from the last that you might sometimes even forget what world you're in. I must have said to myself, wow, this is amazing, about 5 separate times within my first hour of playing, because I was just being presented with so many new things that were consistently done well. I mean, the first level, of course, acts as a bit of an introduction to the important mechanics, and it was good obviously. But then you get to the second level, and I'm in heaven. Everything from the colours, to the background section, to being transported into Little Shop of Horrors on LSD. This feeling doesn't go away for the majority of the game. Yeah, you'll come across a few slightly less memorable levels here and there, but they're not bad by any means. It's just impossibly hard to compete with some of its best courses. The power-ups in Wonder are also pretty consistent in terms of quality. The obvious star of the game being the elephant fruit, which completely changes how you will approach a course. In fact, all of the power-ups offer you entirely different ways to play through a level. The drill mushroom will let you avoid enemies, the fire flower is your best option for ranged attacks, the bubble flower lets you bubble your enemies, but also has a lot of potential for getting a free jump or two. And when the superstar is available, you get to completely charge through a stage without a care in the world. And along with the new power-ups, we also get a whole bunch of new and returning enemies. And while the returning enemies have a fresh coat of paint and are used really well, it's definitely the new enemies that embody the feeling of wonder. My personal favourites being these firework guys, who often actually work in your favour. The only slight letdown when it comes to enemies, really, are the boss fights. I mean, we saw it coming. It's not the Koopalings, but it is Bowser Jr. for every fight. And while I personally feel that the fights aren't bad, it sucks that we didn't get something better. I really do like that the fights feel related to the worlds that we just beat, and that each one plays out different from the last, because of the different mechanics used. But we seriously didn't need it to be against Bowser Jr. every time. Given that the designs of all of the new enemies in the game are so great, it's a shame that we didn't get to see what those designs could have looked like in boss form. This has been, and maybe always will be, one of the biggest flaws for 2D Mario, but thankfully the final fight more than makes up for it. The final area as a whole is pretty great. We have a few great stages, this random but cool concert theme, a bunch of fun quotes from Bowser himself, and the final level feels like this celebration of all of the other worlds we just faced, where we get to see all sorts of enemies and cool concepts, right before facing off against evil Rayman. Or, I guess, just a music-obsessed Bowser. This is honestly an incredible boss fight, where you have to time your jumps to the beat of the song to jump and hit his weak spots, while avoiding the enemies that he throws at you, and also trying not to stare at his questionable midlife crisis dancing in the background. Freedom is also a really great focus that this game seems to have. While you have a lot of freedom to explore in levels, and find different paths or secret areas, the overworld finally gets this treatment as well, where we can choose which levels we want to play, and can decide to entirely avoid some levels if we don't like them, so long as we get enough Wonder Seeds to progress. We even get the freedom to decide the order of worlds we want to go to in the back half of the game, and each world actually feels like a world with different NPC characters, and at times, these mini RPG-like elements. This makes it pretty fun to explore the worlds, and find secret areas or hidden levels, especially since a lot of levels aren't even full stages, but rather things like badge challenges, which are always really fun. You also get a sense of freedom in the badge system, where you can collect different badges that each give you a special ability while playing. Throughout the game, I mainly use the parachute hat badge because I really love gliding with it, but sometimes I'd come across a situation where I think a different badge would be better, and I could just switch to that, which was really fucking easy because finally, we don't get booted out of each level when we die or want to change something like a badge. I think these are overall really fun for just shaking up the game even more than it already is, and will definitely make speedruns insane. And to round off all of the great gameplay elements of Wonder, there is also so much replay value. Every stage will have collectibles, as well as some secret hidden Wonder Seeds. So going for 100% completion is definitely an option, but what's great is that, because of how fun the levels are to play through, and how rewarding it is to find secret things, trying to get 100% completion is genuinely just as fun as the main story of the game. You also have a special world with a bunch of hard stages to beat. These levels have to be found, with secret entrances on the main map, and if that wasn't hard enough, there is a final level in the form of a badge marathon. One of the things that we immediately notice when booting up the game is that everything looks so much different from what we're used to. And while I don't think the NSMB games look bad or anything, they definitely lacked a lot of the charm and expressiveness that Wonder brings to the table. For starters, the player characters all have so much more life in them, and some charming animations for their different movements, and the same goes for the enemies too. The game feels much less like a handful of stages, with a handful of enemies to kill or avoid, and much more like a small part of a vast and varied world. A world that we are apparently the good guys in? Come on Mario, he was only sleeping. The colours throughout the game are also just beautiful, and completely capture the feeling that the stage is trying to give off. I personally just love the vivid greens, and beams of light showing through the leaves on the second stage, contrasted by the red piranha plants and colourful blocks. Of course, a lot of the colours just go batshit crazy once you touch a Wonder Flower, and if less love and time were put into the game, I would assume that this would make the rest of the level feel entirely bland by comparison, but it just doesn't. There isn't a dull or a bland looking area in the entire game really. Even in the smaller areas, with much less going on, everything looks pretty top notch. One of my favourite visual details in the game is probably the new animations for getting a power up. When you get a super mushroom, it really feels like you grow with it, and the background is a nice touch. But when you get something like a fire flower and have a little animation with fireballs, man, it's just so nice to see. It's another one of those things that adds to this feeling of life that the game has, where Mario is reacting to this ability. The same goes for the other power-ups too. It doesn't just feel like your clothes change, and you can now just do something different. It really does feel like you've powered up. The sounds in the game are in a pretty similar boat to the visuals. While I wasn't completely blown away by every track, I was consistently happy with the soundtrack throughout the game. There were also some small sections that were just complete throwbacks to some of our favourite songs. And again, for some unexplained reason, the game has this music theme throughout. Some levels will just kind of start playing their own unique song, which is weird but welcome nonetheless. And since the final boss battle is based around the music that is playing, it acts as such an amazing boss battle soundtrack that you're working in sync to. The sound effects are a bit of a breath of fresh air once again. let's talk about the elephant in the room. Not that one. Our main crew of characters have new voices behind them, and I like it. I think Wonder was probably the perfect game to change things up with the voice actors if they ever wanted to, and I think it's been done really well here. But other than that, the sound effects throughout the game are really easy on the ears and help to give everything even more charm. One of the things that we know about the development of Wonder is that deadlines were kept pretty open. This is something that tends to only ever lead to higher quality products, and, well, it pretty obviously proved to work here too. There is just so much love and passion that has obviously been put into this game by the developers, who were given the time to think up and create some amazing features. This game was definitely made out of passion, rather than out of the need to put out a new 2D Mario game. I think one of my favourite features from the game that oozes with whimsy is with the talking flowers. For some reason, I've seen people say that they find them annoying, but I really don't understand why. As you play through the game, you'll come across a load of these flower guys who always have something to say. At times, this will be something relatively obvious, when it's trying to teach you about the background mechanics or something, but other times it'll be a funny one-liner, or a random little outburst. This just gives them so much character, and every single time I came across one, I made sure I got to hear what it had to say. There are a lot of extremely cool things and areas that you might not even find while playing the game. In past Mario games, hidden areas were either pretty rare or didn't have too much going on, since they weren't going to be seen by a lot of people. But in Wonder, they feel just as good as, or in many cases even better than, the rest of the stage. And it really makes you think, why would they put such cool areas in places that are pretty hard to find? Well, again, it just comes down to that touch of passion that the entire game has. Areas being made well, regardless of who is going to see it. Of course, the Wonder Flowers are where we see most of the creativity in Wonder. Every time you touch one, you really don't know what to expect. And that's pretty great, because it could have been really easy for them to reuse the same 4 or 5 different Wonder Flower concepts throughout the entire game. But instead, you see a huge range of effects that don't tend to repeat themselves too much. And because of how much they change the game, and how fun these segments are, it makes looking for them pretty worthwhile. The passion and creativity that is present in Wonder is absolutely what sets it apart from not only the previous 2D Mario games, but the majority of 2D platformers in general. A lot of the things that we see in this game are often absent from most other AAA platformers, and even indies can find it hard to compete with a lot of the stuff because they simply don't have the same budget. Which puts Wonder in a pretty exclusive category, which has both money, but also a shed load of freedom for passionate, creative game design to shine through. And to top all of this off, we don't only get local multiplayer, but an online multiplayer option too, which I think was implemented perfectly. People can hop in and out of levels as they please, you don't need to wait for others to finish, but you can still interact in some ways. When playing one of those scavenger hunt type levels, another player was helping guide me to a secret, and this was such a cool feeling of community, even if we couldn't communicate properly and didn't need to help each other out, which only led me to try and do the exact same thing for some other players. It's just such an amazing thing to be able to do. Super Mario Bros. Wonder is absolutely up there with the best Mario titles. The gameplay is solid at worst, and mesmerising otherwise. Its visuals may just be the best the franchise has ever seen, and I think it would be stupid to say that this wasn't one of, if not the most creative, Mario titles to date. While playing it, I couldn't help but smile to myself, saying things like this is amazing, over, and over, and over again. Because it is. I don't like bashing on the NSMB games too much, because I do think they're all solid games in their own right, but Wonder just clears each and every one of them by a mile, purely because it does everything right as a standard, but also pushes the boat out time and time again. This is a game that kept me gripped throughout the entire story, and had me coming back for much more when I finished it. I have no doubts that I'm going to keep on playing through to collect flower coins, find Wonder Seeds, and maybe just mess around with a few different badges. Wonder is a very special and unique game that I'm positive will inspire many others like it in the future.